I never thought a single email would unravel my entire world. It arrived on a Tuesday morning while I was sipping coffee at my desk, buried in quarterly reports. The subject line was simple: Hartman Industries urgent. I almost marked it as spam. My name is Lila, and until that moment, I thought I knew everything about my family's business. Being the eldest daughter of Everett Hartman meant growing up with spreadsheets instead of bedtime stories. I'd spent the last 5 years working my way up through different departments, determined to prove I was more than just the boss's daughter. The email contained 2 attachments. The first was a series of financial records showing irregular transactions dating back 18 months. The second was a simple note: trust no one, not even family. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the documents. The numbers didn't add up, literally. There were discrepancies in the international accounts, patterns that seemed deliberately designed to hide something. But what caught my eye was the digital signature at the bottom of each transaction. N.R. Nolan Reese. My brother-in-law. Hey, superstar. Speaking of the devil, Nolan's voice made me jump. I slammed my laptop shut as he appeared in my office doorway, wearing his trademark $1,000 smile. Your father wants us in the conference room. Quarterly review time. I'll be right there, I managed, trying to keep my voice steady. Nolan lingered, his eyes flickering to my closed laptop. Everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Just caffeine jitters, I lied, forcing a smile. 3rd cup of the day. He laughed, but something in his expression shifted, just for a second. Well, don't keep the old man waiting. You know how he gets. I watched him walk away, his perfectly tailored suit hiding whatever secrets he carried. The same suit my sister Iris had probably helped him pick out, completely unaware of what her husband might be doing. The conference room was already full when I arrived. My father stood at the head of the table, commanding attention without saying a word. At 62, he still had the same presence that had built Hartman Industries from the ground up. His silver hair and stern expression were as much a part of the company's image as our logo. Lila, nice of you to join us, he said, his tone carrying that familiar edge of disappointment. Nolan was just about to present the international division's numbers. I took my seat, watching Nolan set up his presentation with practiced ease. My mind raced. Should I say something now? Confront him in front of everyone? But what if I was wrong? What if the email was just someone trying to cause trouble? As you can see, Nolan's voice cut through my thoughts. Our Asian markets have shown remarkable growth this quarter. I studied the slides, seeing them with new eyes. The numbers he presented were different from the ones in my email. Either the email was wrong, or Nolan was very good at covering his tracks. Excellent work, son, my father said, clapping Nolan on the shoulder. The pride in his voice made my stomach turn. It was the tone I'd spent my entire life trying to earn. After the meeting, I lingered in the conference room, pretending to organize my notes. My father and Nolan were the last to leave, discussing golf plans for the weekend. Just before they walked out, Nolan turned back. Oh, Lila? Delete any weird emails you get today. IT says there's some phishing scam going around. Our eyes met, and in that moment, I knew 2 things with absolute certainty. First, the email wasn't a scam. And second, Nolan knew exactly what I'd received. The game was on. The only question was, how far was I willing to go to protect my family from one of its own? Family dinners at the Hartman mansion had always been a minefield, but tonight felt different. Maybe it was the weight of the USB drive in my jacket pocket, filled with more suspicious transactions I'd discovered. Or maybe it was the way Nolan kept glancing at me across the elaborate dining room table, his usual charm tinged with something darker. The salmon is lovely, Celeste, Nolan said, flashing his perfect smile at my mother. You've outdone yourself. Oh, I wish I could take credit, Mom laughed. But you know I leave the cooking to Maria these days. I pushed my food around my plate, my appetite gone. 3 days of digging through company records had revealed a pattern that made my skin crawl. International accounts that didn't quite match up, partnerships with shell companies that seemed to exist only on paper. Lila, my father's voice cut through my thoughts. I noticed you've been requesting access to files outside your department. The clinking of silverware stopped. Iris, my sister, looked up from her phone for the first time all evening. Just trying to understand the bigger picture, I said carefully. You always say a good leader needs to see how all the pieces fit together. There's a difference between understanding and overstepping, he replied. Some of those files are sensitive. Nolan's been working hard on those international deals. Has he? The words slipped out before I could stop them. Because the numbers from the Singapore office don't quite add up. Nolan's fork paused halfway to his mouth. What do you mean? Just that the reported profits don't match the operational costs. Almost like money's disappearing somewhere between here and there. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. My father set down his wine glass with deliberate care. If you have concerns about the company's finances, you bring them to me privately, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. Not at the dinner table. When, Dad? Between your golf games with Nolan or your private meetings where I'm not invited. Lila, my mother warned, but I was past caring. Did you know about the shell companies? Or the offshore accounts that keep showing up in the paperwork? That's enough. My father's fist hit the table, making the crystal glasses jump. You're letting your imagination run wild. Nolan has brought in more international business in 2 years than we've seen in the last decade. Because he's cooking the books. Silence fell like a hammer. Iris stared at me, her face pale. What are you talking about? Ask your husband, I said, meeting Nolan's steady gaze. Ask him about the transactions signed NR that don't appear in the official records. This is ridiculous, Nolan laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. Everett, I think Lila's been working too hard. Maybe she needs a break. I agree, my father said. Take some time off, Lila. Clear your head. You're suspending me? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. While he's potentially stealing from the company? While you're making unfounded accusations against family, he corrected. Nolan is as much my son as you are my daughter. The words hit like a physical blow. I pushed back from the table, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Family doesn't steal from family, I said quietly. And some of us actually earned our place in the company. I walked out, ignoring my mother's calls to come back. In the hallway, I heard footsteps behind me. That was quite a show. Nolan's voice was soft, meant only for me. But you might want to be careful where you point that finger. You never know what else might come to light. I turned to face him. Is that a threat? Just some friendly advice, he smiled. Family's complicated enough without stirring up trouble. Wouldn't want Iris getting hurt in all this, would we? He walked away, leaving me with the sickening realization that I'd just made things much worse. But as I stood there, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You're looking in the right place. But you're not seeing the whole picture yet. Check the Morrison acquisition from last year. The game wasn't over. It was just getting started. The Morrison acquisition files were like finding a map to buried treasure. If the treasure was evidence of my brother-in-law's betrayal. I'd spent 3 days holed up in my apartment, using my forced break to dig deeper into the company records I'd managed to download before leaving. The numbers were worse than I'd imagined. Morrison Technologies had been valued at twice its actual worth, with the excess apparently vanishing into a maze of offshore accounts. But something else caught my eye, a series of emails between Nolan and someone using an encrypted address, discussing what they called Plan B. My doorbell rang, startling me out of my research haze. Through the peephole, I saw Iris, looking uncharacteristically serious. You look terrible, she said when I opened the door. When's the last time you slept? I'm fine. I stepped aside to let her in, quickly closing my laptop. What brings you here? Dad's worried about you. She perched on my couch, studying me. He thinks you're having some kind of breakdown. Of course he does. I laughed, but it came out bitter. Because heaven forbid something actually be wrong with his perfect company or his perfect son-in-law. About that, Iris twisted her wedding ring, a nervous habit she'd had since childhood. Nolan's been acting strange lately. Coming home late, taking calls in private. I found a receipt for a safety deposit box I didn't know about. My heart raced. Have you looked inside it? No, but... She pulled something from her purse, a small key. I copied this while he was in the shower. I stared at the key, thinking about Nolan's threat at dinner. Iris, if you're having doubts about Nolan, maybe you should. Mrs. Reese. A man's voice called from my hallway, followed by rapid knocking. Building security. We need to speak with you. Iris froze. I told Nolan I was going shopping. I moved quickly, grabbing my laptop and the USB drive. Fire escape. Now. We slipped out just as my door burst open. Through the window, I glimpsed 2 men in suits, definitely not building security. What's happening? Iris whispered as we climbed down. Who are they? I don't know, but I don't think they're here about overdue rent. My phone buzzed, another text from the unknown number. Bank of Commerce. Downtown branch. Box 2317. Hurry. That's the bank where Nolan's box is, Iris said, reading over my shoulder. Then that's where we're going. I flagged down a taxi. You should go home, pretend you know nothing about this. No way. She grabbed my arm. He's my husband. If he's involved in something illegal, I need to know. The bank was nearly empty when we arrived. Iris's hand shook as she used the key, but the box opened smoothly. Inside was a single manila envelope. "Oh God," Iris whispered as we spread the contents across a private viewing table. Photos of our father meeting with known corporate raiders. Documents showing massive loans taken out against company assets. And a contract signed by both Nolan and our father to sell controlling interest in Hartman Industries. He's not stealing from the company, I realized, the pieces finally clicking together. He's helping Dad strip it for parts before it goes under. Why would they do this? Iris's voice cracked. Because the company's been failing for years. Nolan's voice made us both jump. He stood in the doorway, looking tired rather than triumphant. Your father's been hiding it, taking bigger and bigger risks to keep up appearances. I tried to help him find a way out. By betraying everyone who trusts you? I stepped between him and Iris. By saving what I could before it all collapses. He ran a hand through his hair. The hostile takeover is happening whether we cooperate or not. This way, at least the family gets something out of it. You're wrong, I said, gathering the documents. There's always another way. Lila, he called as we pushed past him. You can't stop this. Even your father knows it's over. I turned back, seeing not the confident manipulator I'd feared, but a desperate man trying to justify his choices. Watch me. As we left the bank, my phone buzzed one final time. Now you know the truth. What are you going to do about it? Good question. The game had changed, but I wasn't done playing yet. Not by a long shot. The family estate looked different in the rain. Smaller somehow, less intimidating. I sat in my car, watching droplets race down the windshield, the manila envelope from the bank heavy in my lap. Iris had gone home to deal with Nolan. Whatever that meant. But I needed answers from someone else first. My mother opened the door before I could knock. I wondered when you'd come, she said, pulling me inside. Your father's not here. Golf despite the weather. With Nolan? No. She studied my face. You look just like him, you know. When something's eating at you, you get the same crease between your eyebrows. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and coffee, Mom's comfort routine when she was worried. She poured 2 cups without asking. How long have you known? I placed the envelope on the counter between us. About what? Her hands trembled slightly as she added cream to her coffee. About Dad selling out the company. About everything falling apart while he pretends everything's fine. She sat down heavily. Since last Christmas. I overheard him arguing with someone on the phone about loan payments. He didn't know I was there. And you didn't say anything? To whom, Lila? Your father hasn't really listened to me in years. Not about anything important. She touched the envelope. What's in here? Proof. Of the loans, the secret meetings, the deal he made with Nolan too. The sound of breaking glass made us both jump. In the doorway stood Iris, mascara streaked down her face. I went to confront Nolan, she said, her voice hollow. But he was already gone. The apartment's empty. His clothes, his papers, everything. Mom rushed to hold her, but Iris pushed past us both, grabbing the envelope and dumping its contents across the kitchen counter. He left this. She held up a handwritten note. Says he's sorry, but it's too late to stop what's coming. That Dad made deals he can't back out of. What kind of deals? Mom asked. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a news alert. My stomach dropped as I read the headline. Hartman Industries stocks plummet amid rumors of hostile takeover. It's starting, I whispered. They're making their move. Who is? Iris demanded. Morrison Technologies. The same company that... I stopped, seeing Mom's expression. What? Morrison? She went pale. Charles Morrison? You know him. She walked to the study, returning with an old photo album. Charles Morrison and your father were best friends in college. Business partners in their first venture. Until your father. Well, he always said he did what he had to do to succeed. The photo showed 2 young men grinning at the camera, arms around each other's shoulders. I recognized my father, but the other man. That's him, I said, pulling up a recent photo on my phone. That's who Dad's been meeting with. But why would he help Dad now? Help him. Mom laughed bitterly. Charles Morrison spent 30 years waiting for revenge. What better way than to let Everett think he was saving the company, only to destroy it completely? My phone buzzed again, the anonymous number. Check the basement storage room. Behind the wine rack. Hurry. How are you getting these messages? Iris asked, reading over my shoulder. I don't know, but they've been right so far. The basement was cold and damp. Together, we moved the wine rack, revealing a wall safe I'd never noticed before. Mom's hands shook as she entered the combination. Your father's birthday, she explained. He never was creative with passwords. Inside was a single USB drive and another handwritten note. For Lila, when you're ready to know everything. Love, Dad. The date on this. Mom touched the paper gently. This was written 3 months ago. My phone buzzed one final time. Now you have all the pieces. Time to choose. Save the company or save your father. You can't do both. I looked at Mom and Iris, seeing my own fear reflected in their eyes. Dad hadn't just been hiding the company's problems. He'd been preparing for something. But what? The real game was just beginning, and I had a sickening feeling we were all just pawns on someone else's board. The USB drive from Dad's safe contained exactly what I expected, and everything I feared. Financial records, old correspondence, and a video file dated 3 days before Nolan disappeared. My hands trembled as I pressed play. Lila. My father's face filled the screen, looking older than I remembered. If you're watching this, then Charles Morrison has made his move. I knew this day would come, but I hoped. He paused, rubbing his temples. What I did to Charles 30 years ago was unforgivable. I stole more than just his share of the company. I stole his future, his reputation. Now he's taking everything back, and I deserve it. But you don't. A knock at my apartment door made me jump. Through the peephole, I saw a face I recognized from the photos, Charles Morrison himself. Miss Hartman, he smiled when I opened the door. I believe we're overdue for a chat. He looked nothing like the young man from the photo album. Time had hardened him, carved deep lines around cold eyes. Where's my father? Safe. For now. He settled into my armchair like he owned it. I assume you've seen the video. Did he tell you what really happened in '93? He stole your share of the company. Morrison laughed, but there was no humor in it. He stole my company, my patents, then fabricated evidence that I was selling trade secrets to competitors. I lost everything, my reputation, my family, even my freedom for a while. And now you're doing the same to him? No, he leaned forward. I'm offering you a choice. One your father never gave me. He pulled out a folder, sliding it across my coffee table. Inside was a contract, a way to save Hartman Industries by selling it to Morrison Technologies, piece by piece. Sign this, and the company survives under new management. Refuse, and I destroy everything your father built. He checked his watch. You have until midnight. Why me? Why not ask Dad? Because Everett Hartman would rather watch it all burn than admit defeat. But you. He studied me carefully. You understand sacrifice for the greater good. Just like your mother did. My blood ran cold. What does my mother have to do with this? Ask her about September 1993. About the real reason she helped your father destroy me. He stood to leave. Oh, and Lila? Don't bother looking for Nolan. He was just doing his job, my job. After he left, I called Mom. Her voice shook when I mentioned September 1993. I can't. Not over the phone, she whispered. Meet me at the lake house. Come alone. The family lake house held countless summer memories, but in the gathering dusk, it looked abandoned, forgotten. Mom sat on the deck, staring at the water. Charles Morrison was in love with me, she said as I sat beside her. Before your father. We were engaged, but I chose Everett instead. When Charles threatened to expose some of Everett's early business dealings, I helped destroy him. The evidence against Charles was my idea. My phone buzzed, another anonymous text. The truth hurts, doesn't it? But there's more. Check the boathouse. Don't, Mom grabbed my arm. Please. But I was already moving. The boathouse door creaked open, revealing a figure in the shadows. Hello, sweetheart. My father stepped into the fading light. I suppose we need to talk. About what? How you and Mom ruined an innocent man's life. How you let Nolan spy on your own family. Or about how you're hiding here while everything falls apart. About how I'm trying to protect you, he said quietly. Morrison doesn't want revenge, Lila. He wants to destroy our family completely. The company is just the beginning. My phone buzzed one final time. Time to choose, Lila. Family or justice. You have 2 hours left. Don't trust anyone who claims to love you. They're all liars. I looked at my father, the man I'd spent my whole life trying to please, and my mother, who'd sacrificed her conscience for love. The truth hadn't set anyone free. It had just revealed how deep the lies went. No more secrets, I said. Tell me everything. Now. The lake water lapped at the shore, counting down the minutes until midnight, when I'd have to decide who to betray, my family or my principles. Maybe in the end they were the same thing. The boardroom felt like a tomb at midnight. I sat alone, Morrison's contract on one side, my father's USB drive on the other. 30 minutes left to decide. My phone lit up, Iris calling for the 5th time. I let it ring. After what Dad and Mom told me at the lake house, I couldn't trust anyone's version of the truth anymore. The door opened. Nolan walked in, looking nothing like the polished executive who'd married my sister. His suit was wrinkled, his confidence replaced by something darker. "Don't sign it," he said, dropping into the chair across from me. "Why?" "Because it ruins your plan with Morrison. Because he's lying to you, just like I lied to Iris." He pulled out his phone, playing a recording. Morrison's voice filled the room. "Once she signs, destroy everything. The company, the family name, all of it. Make sure Everett watches it burn. Why are you showing me this? Because your sister deserved better than me. Because maybe one of us should do the right thing." Before I could respond, the boardroom doors burst open. Morrison strode in, flanked by 2 men in suits. Behind them, my father struggled against a third man's grip. "I'm disappointed, Nolan," Morrison sighed. "I thought we had an understanding." "Let him go." I stood, but Morrison's men blocked my path. "Sign the contract, Lila. Or your father faces fraud charges that'll put him away longer than I was." "Don't." Dad's voice was hoarse. "Let him do his worst." Morrison laughed. "Tell her, Everett. Tell her what really happened to my daughter after you destroyed me." I froze. "What daughter?" "Sarah Morrison," Dad whispered. "She was 16 when the scandal hit. She couldn't handle the shame. The bullying. He couldn't finish. She killed herself," Morrison's voice cracked. "While I was in prison for crimes your father committed. That's what this is about, Lila. Not money. Not the company. Justice." My phone buzzed one final time. The truth was never about saving the company. It was about saving your soul. Choose wisely. The message was from Mom. "Sign it," Nolan suddenly said. "Sign it, then open the file marked Sarah on the USB." Morrison's head snapped toward the drive. "What file?" My hands shook as I connected it to the boardroom's computer. The projector hummed to life, showing a video I hadn't seen before. Sarah Morrison's face filled the screen, not 16 and tragic, but very much alive. 30-something, speaking directly to the camera. "Hello, Dad. If you're watching this, you've gone through with your revenge plan." She smiled sadly. "I didn't die. The Hartmans helped me disappear, gave me a new life when you became obsessed with destroying them. I chose to leave. And if you're hurting them now, you're proving I made the right choice." The room fell silent except for Morrison's ragged breathing. "She's lying," he whispered. "This is another trick." "Check the metadata," Nolan said. "The video's 3 days old. Sarah's alive in Vancouver. Living under the name you chose for her, Grace Mitchell." Morrison staggered, grabbing the table for support. "All these years. You want justice?" I stood, ripping the contract in half. "Go find your daughter. Leave my family alone." "Lila," Dad warned, but Morrison waved off his men. "You knew," he said to my father. "You knew she was alive, and you let me. I promised her I'd keep her safe. Even from you." Morrison walked out without another word. His men followed, leaving me with Dad and Nolan. "How did you know about the video?" I asked Nolan. "Because I'm the one who helped Sarah make it." He stood to leave. "Tell Iris. Tell her I'm sorry. For everything." My phone buzzed one last time. An unknown number, but not the usual one. "Thank you for keeping your promise, Uncle Everett. I'm ready to come home now." "Sarah." I looked at my father, seeing not the powerful businessman or the manipulative liar, but just a man who'd tried to protect everyone and ended up hurting them instead. "We need to talk," I said. "About everything. No more secrets." He nodded, looking older than I'd ever seen him. "Where do you want to start?" "With the truth. All of it. While we still have a family left to save." The emergency board meeting felt like a powder keg waiting to explode. Every major stakeholder sat around the massive oak table, their faces illuminated by the morning sun streaming through the windows. Dad occupied his usual seat at the head, but his eyes kept darting to the empty chair where Nolan should have been. I stood, my hands steady despite my racing heart. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice." "This better be important," Richard Chun, our biggest investor, growled. "The stock's already down 30%. "It is." I connected my laptop to the projector. "Because everything you think you know about Hartman Industries is wrong." The screen filled with documents, the real numbers, the hidden accounts, everything I'd uncovered. But instead of showing Nolan's deception, I displayed something else. Proof of how Dad had saved the company, again and again, by taking personal risks rather than laying off workers. "My father isn't perfect," I said, meeting his startled gaze. But everything he did to protect people, including Sarah Morrison. The boardroom doors burst open. Morrison strode in, Sarah beside him. The room erupted in whispers. "What is this?" Dad stood, his face pale. "The truth," Sarah said. "All of it." I clicked to the next slide. Evidence of Morrison's planned hostile takeover, obtained from Nolan's files. Charles Morrison didn't just want revenge. He wanted to strip the company and sell it for parts. Thousands would lose their jobs. "You don't understand," Morrison started, but Sarah cut him off. "No, Dad. You don't understand. The Hartmans didn't destroy our family. Your obsession with revenge did." The boardroom fell silent. I moved to the final slides, my proposal for saving the company. "We can merge Morrison Technologies with Hartman Industries. Equal partnership. Both families working together like you originally planned 30 years ago." "Impossible," Morrison scoffed, but I saw uncertainty in his eyes. "Why?" I challenged. "Because it's harder than revenge? Because it means admitting that both sides made mistakes. Because I don't trust him," Morrison pointed at my father. "Then trust me." Sarah stepped forward. "I'll oversee the merger. Both sides, complete transparency." A commotion at the door drew everyone's attention. Nolan walked in, Iris right behind him. "Sorry I'm late," he said, dropping a thick folder on the table. "But I brought something you all need to see." Inside were documents proving that both companies would fail without the merger. Morrison's revenge plan had already triggered a chain reaction in the market. "We either save both companies," Nolan said, "or we lose everything. Why should we trust you?" Morrison demanded. "Because I'm done lying." Nolan looked at Iris. "To anyone." The room erupted in argument. Board members took sides, threats were made, decades of bitterness bubbled to the surface. I watched it all, seeing the past and future of both families hanging by a thread. "Enough!" My voice cut through the chaos. "This isn't about the past anymore. It's about choosing what kind of future we want to build." I turned to Morrison. "You lost your family because of revenge. Are you really willing to let it happen again?" Then to my father. "And you've spent 30 years trying to protect everyone by keeping secrets. How's that working out?" Finally, to the board. "We have a chance to make this right. Not just the companies, but the families too. What's your vote?" The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Then Richard Chun raised his hand. "I vote yes to the merger." One by one, others followed. Morrison and my father stared at each other across decades of hatred and regret. "Sarah will run it?" Morrison asked quietly. Dad nodded. "With Lila? Together?" "Then, yes." The tension in the room broke like a fever. As people began discussing details, Dad pulled me aside. "When did you become so wise?" he asked softly. "When I stopped trying to be you," I replied, "and started trying to be better." My phone buzzed one last time. "Well done. Now the real work begins." "Mom." I smiled, watching Sarah and Iris already deep in conversation, while Nolan hung back, uncertainty and hope warring on his face. We'd all chosen truth over revenge, healing over hatred. Now we just had to make it work. 6 months after the merger, I stood in my father's old office, my office now, watching the sunset paint the city skyline. The door opened quietly behind me. "Still working late?" Mom asked, setting down 2 cups of coffee. "Just thinking." I turned to face her. "It was you, wasn't it? The anonymous texts." She smiled, that knowing look I'd seen all my life, but never truly understood until now. "Someone had to push you toward the truth. Your father was too proud, and I was too afraid. Until I wasn't." The new company logo glowed on my computer screen. Hartman Morrison Industries. Sarah had suggested keeping both names, a reminder that the past shouldn't be erased, just learned from. "Have you spoken to Iris?" Mom asked carefully. "She's in Paris with Nolan." I picked up a photo from my desk, Iris and Nolan at the airport last week, trying again differently this time. Marriage counseling, plus she's photographing his redemption project. The project had been Nolan's idea, using company resources to help families affected by corporate fraud. His way of making amends, supervised by both boards to ensure transparency. And Charles Morrison? Still learning to be a father again. I showed her another photo on my phone, Sarah and Charles at last week's charity gala, awkward but trying. Sarah says he's different when it's just them. Softer. "And your father?" I glanced at the lake house keys on my desk. Dad had moved there permanently after stepping down, claiming he needed peace and quiet. But we both knew he was giving me space to lead without his shadow. "He's teaching me to sail," I said. "Well, trying to. Mostly we just talk. About everything. The past. The future. How sometimes protecting people means letting them face the truth, even when it hurts. A knock at the door interrupted us. Richard Chun entered, looking unusually nervous. Sorry to interrupt, but we found something in the old Morrison tech files. He handed me a folder. You need to see this. Inside was evidence of another company, another family, that both our fathers had wronged years ago. History threatening to repeat itself. What are you going to do? Mom asked quietly. I thought about revenge, about justice, about the weight of secrets and the cost of truth. About how breaking cycles matters more than breaking even. I'm going to call Sarah, I said, reaching for my phone. Then I'm going to call this family and offer them a chance to heal. The right way this time. Mom squeezed my hand, understanding in her eyes. When did you become so wise? When I realized wisdom isn't about having all the answers. It's about being brave enough to face the questions. After they left, I opened my laptop to write an email, not to the board or our shareholders, but to Iris. She'd asked me last week why I stayed, why I kept trying to fix what our parents had broken. Because someone has to break the cycle, I typed. Because every time we choose truth over convenience, healing over revenge, we make it easier for the next generation to do the same. And maybe that's the best legacy we can leave. My phone buzzed one last time, not an anonymous text, but a message from Dad. Sailing lesson tomorrow? There's something I need to tell you. I smiled, thinking about all the truths still waiting to be uncovered, all the healing still to be done. But this time we'd face it together in the light. See you at sunrise, I replied. Looking out at the city again, I saw not just buildings and lights, but stories, thousands of them, interconnected, complicated, waiting to be told. Some were ending, some just beginning. Mine was somewhere in between. The truth hadn't set us free exactly, but it had shown us a better way to be bound together, by choice and courage rather than secrets and fear. And maybe that was enough. I gathered my things, ready to head home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new truths to face. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of what we'd find. After all, the best stories aren't about perfect endings. They're about perfect moments to begin again.
With a sly smile, Larry entered my hospital room and said something that hurt. You're incapable of even handling simple housework. Let's just get a divorce, he declared. A woman I didn't know was standing next to him, connected to a lot of medical equipment. I observed them in silence, observing how little Larry understood about my actual net worth. $10 million, to be exact. For a homemaker like myself, the stakes in a divorce felt almost too great to be true. Firm in my choice, I understood that I couldn't stay with someone who made fun of his wife when she was in such a vulnerable situation. Reaching into my bag, I retrieved the divorce papers I had been carrying, prepared for a moment like this. Handing them over with a defiant smile, I watched as Larry accepted them. I'll be happier with her, so don't worry, Larry declared, draping his arm around the woman whom he introduced as Brenda. Brenda gave me a condescending look and remarked, "Take care, ma'am." Not a miss anymore. With those parting words, they left the room, laughter trailing behind them. Their joy seemed transient. Alone, I couldn't help but burst into laughter myself. It was Friday, and by Monday, the divorce would be processed. The thought of only 4 more days until freedom made my heart race with anticipation. My name is Natalie Ruth, a 40-year-old housewife living on a farm. While I might not boast any special skills, I take great pride in my extensive cooking abilities. My husband, Larry, and I share the same age and once walked the halls of the same college. After graduation, we moved from the countryside to Florida, living by ourselves. I often cooked for Larry using fresh vegetables and rice sent by my family. Many believed that my cooking was the way to his heart, and I tended to agree. Larry, to this day, struggles with any kind of household chore. Ever since our dating days, I've taken care of him, and nothing changed after our marriage. Although we never had children, we found joy in our shared lives, especially our mutual love for food. We enjoyed driving out for short trips on his days off, seeking new culinary delights. When we were newlyweds, Larry was gentle and kind. However, about 2 years into our marriage, he started to change, becoming more controlling. He never became physically aggressive, but his sharp words often stung, and I found myself too weary to argue, doubting he would listen to a full-time housewife like me. Larry initially landed a prestigious job after university, but left it within 5 years. He moved between jobs frequently afterward, which meant our financial situation was always uncertain. This instability and his increasingly harsh demeanor made our relationship more challenging, but I continued to manage our home and hope for better days ahead. Our financial struggles were a constant in our lives, but Larry seemed to have found some stability at his latest job, where he'd been for the past 3 years. He got along well with his colleagues, and I quietly hoped he might stay there for the long haul. Then one day, he came home earlier than usual. "I'm home." "I quit my job," he announced. Surprised, I blurted out, "What?" Again, this visibly irritated him. I saw his eyebrows twitch. Dropping everything, I rushed over to him. "I'm sorry, I was just shocked." "No welcome back." I tried to backtrack, as he retorted sharply, "You've become quite audacious." Larry was clearly in a foul mood, and I feared any wrong word might escalate the tension. "I'm sorry," I said carefully, trying to calm the storm. He grumbled a bit, but seemed somewhat placated as he sank into the sofa and turned on the TV. I quietly set a beer and a glass on the table. "Do you want dinner or a bath?" I asked. "Food and alcohol," he replied. To keep the peace, I slipped back into the role of the submissive wife, a role I had been playing for the 10 years of our marriage. After he had eaten and drunk to his satisfaction, Larry fell asleep on the sofa, snoring loudly. The table was a mess, looking as if a child had been there. I began cleaning up, picking up fallen beer bottles and scraps of food from the floor. As I cleaned, I reflected on my life. This wasn't the marriage I had envisioned. Memories of happier days as a young girl in love surfaced, revealing my buried feelings. I glanced at Larry, fast asleep with no sign of waking soon, and felt a mix of relief and dread. Was continuing this life worth it? Perhaps it was time to consider a divorce. The next day, while Larry started job hunting, I signed the divorce papers at the city office. I wasn't ready to file them yet, but having them felt like a form of protection. I discreetly placed the signed papers at the bottom of my frequently used bag, worrying about his reaction if he ever found them. "Where did you wander off to while I was job hunting?" Larry asked when I returned. "I went to the stationery store to buy some resumes." "Look, I thought you might need them," I replied, handing him the resumes. That day, Larry was unusually thoughtful. He questioned me initially, but soon lightened up after receiving the resumes. He mentioned going out for drinks with a friend and left. His new job was with a reputable company, offering a solid salary and better benefits than before. I held a secret hope that maybe this time Larry would stick with his job until retirement, especially since his new department seemed to be in sales. Larry started spending more evenings out, seeking entertainment, which left me with brief periods of solitude that I treasured. I used these moments to recharge, always managing a smile for Larry upon his return. One afternoon, a call from my mother broke the routine. It had been a while since we last spoke, and she was bubbling with excitement over some unexpected news. We had our mountains and lands appraised, and they're worth $9 million, she explained. We only need $5 million to enjoy our retirement, so you should consider what this means for you. My mother had always been skeptical of Larry, particularly as he grew more controlling, even preventing me from visiting my childhood home. The news of the windfall was shocking enough, But what truly stunned me was that my mother had transferred the property titles from my grandmother to me to avoid inheritance taxes. Now faced with a crucial decision, I pondered whether to share this with Larry or keep it as my secret leverage toward newfound freedom. A week later, life threw another curveball. I was involved in a traffic accident. Although not life-threatening, the injuries required a week-long hospital stay. After securing my valuables in my hospital room drawer, I reluctantly called Larry to inform him. "I'm sorry I got injured," I said. His first reaction was self-centered. "Huh. What about my meals?" he asked. I held back my frustration and explained, "I'll need to be hospitalized for a week." "Could you manage your meals until then?" His response lacked any semblance of understanding or empathy. That night, I had planned to discuss the inheritance with him, but his callousness made me reconsider. As I lay in the hospital bed surrounded by medical equipment, I felt a strong intuition about the upcoming events. Larry's visit to the hospital confirmed my worst fears. His first words were cutting. "You're useless. Can't even do housework. Let's get a divorce, and you better pay me compensation," he sneered, oblivious to my financial standing. A young woman stood by his side, smirking disdainfully at my plight. With a grim resolve, I decided that I could no longer be with someone who would treat his wife so harshly in her time of need. I retrieved the divorce papers I had kept almost as a talisman from my bag and handed them to him with a forced smile. "Here, I guess it's time we said goodbye," I said. Larry grinned smugly as he took the papers. "I'll be happier with her," he declared, his arm around the young woman he introduced as Brenda. She leaned against him and mockingly said, "Take care, madam." "Oh, you're not a madam anymore. Take care, old lady." As they left the room, laughing, I felt a bittersweet relief wash over me. Free from his disdain, I now faced the future with a significant inheritance and a life to rebuild on my terms. As I lay in my hospital bed that Friday, laughter bubbled up inside me. The divorce papers had been served, and by Monday they would be processed. The weekend passed in peaceful silence. Larry did not attempt to contact me, which was a welcome respite, yet oddly unsettling for someone accustomed to constant activity. Come Monday evening, however, my phone began to incessantly ring. After about half an hour of persistent calls, I finally decided to pick up. Larry's voice, loud and irate, greeted me immediately. His fury over the divorce papers not being processed as he expected only fueled my laughter, which seemed to infuriate him even more. "I have already filed a notice of non-acceptance," I informed him between chuckles, reminding him of his frequent threats of divorce during our trivial arguments. Larry was clearly agitated, quickly demanding that I withdraw the notice. But I was no longer the woman who jumped at his command. I calmly explained that nothing could be done until I was discharged from the hospital, and that we need to sort this out at the municipal office. His selfishness was almost comical, and it didn't stop there. Larry blurted out his intentions to register his marriage with Brenda, the woman he had introduced as his new companion. He corrected himself in a panic when I mischievously asked if her name was Kaveen, and if she was his mistress. "She's my new wife, and technically your mistress since we're not divorced yet," he asserted. I responded to his absurdity with cool composure, frustrating him further. Deciding to strike a more serious chord, I informed him that he would be hearing from my lawyer regarding the division of our assets. I emphasized how I had always managed our household and remained faithful, highlighting his role in our failing marriage. Larry seemed genuinely confused, as if my inability to perform housework from a hospital bed was a betrayal. I explained with patient clarity that my hospitalization did not equate to negligence on my part, and that his failure to support me in these times showed his true character. The conversation ended with Larry flustered, and at a loss, a stark contrast to the confident man who had left the hospital room with a smirk just days before. As I recuperated in my hospital bed, the absurdity of Larry's expectations became more apparent. He seemed to think that even as an adult, I was responsible for his well-being, equating my inability to perform house chores due to hospitalization with neglect. His logic was so skewed that it would likely astonish even a judge. Yet despite his gradual understanding of the situation, he stubbornly clung to his belief that he was justified, especially now that he had Brenda by his side and claimed he no longer needed me. I reminded him sharply that his secret relationship with Brenda constituted cheating, a point he stubbornly refused to accept. Frustrated and seeing no end to his circular arguments, I decisively ended the conversation, instructing him to communicate through our lawyers. Thereafter, I hung up, ignoring the barrage of calls that followed until he eventually ceased. However, the peace was short-lived. The next morning, my phone started ringing incessantly from 8:00 a.m., pressing the call button. I was immediately met with Larry's complaints about being unable to withdraw money from a bank account. He seemed puzzled as to why he couldn't access funds from what he assumed was a joint account. I asked him if he was attempting to withdraw from my personal account, to which he confirmed he was. Larry's anger flared as he failed to grasp the protective measures I had put in place before being hospitalized. I had called the bank to temporarily prevent any withdrawals, anticipating that Larry might recklessly tap into my savings while I was incapacitated. This precaution proved wise. Larry demanded that I authorize a withdrawal immediately, failing to see the impropriety of trying to take money from an account belonging to someone he was divorcing. I calmly explained that we were effectively strangers now, and I had no obligations to finance strangers. This newfound assertiveness shocked him. He was unaccustomed to me standing my ground. He insisted that I send him money and even suggested I owed him compensation for not performing household duties. It seemed that despite his education, Larry lacked basic common sense. After 12 years of marriage, treating him with the patience one might use with a child, I reiterated that any financial settlements would be handled through our lawyers. Larry's frustration boiled over, and he threatened to visit me in the hospital. Unfazed by his threats, I remained calm, prepared to face him if necessary, confident in my decision to stand up for myself and move on from the manipulative dynamics of our marriage. After my conversation with Larry, I had preemptively informed the nursing staff at the hospital to only allow visits from my parents, ensuring that Larry couldn't just barge into my room. Despite this, he attempted to visit but was stopped at the nurse's station, leading him to switch tactics by flooding my phone with calls and messages. I saved these messages as evidence and got in touch with my lawyer, who promptly dealt with the situation, causing the incessant notifications to cease. Just as I was beginning to relax, thinking the drama was subsiding, an unexpected twist emerged. I was informed that Denise, a longtime friend with whom I had lost touch after marriage, was visiting. Denise and I had a history of shared dining adventures sparked by our mutual love for food, which we frequently discussed on social media. She came by, expressing concern over my accident and bringing startling news about Brenda, the young woman with Larry. Denise revealed that Brenda was actually her niece and confessed that she had overheard her planning to marry a 40-year-old man. When Denise saw a photo of the supposed fiancé, she recognized him as my husband, Larry. Shocked by the coincidence and the deceit, Denise shared that she had already informed her sister about the situation and was contemplating demanding compensation from Brenda for the distress caused. Assuring me of her support, Denise expressed her desire to maintain our friendship, undeterred by the familial connection to my ongoing marital strife. She had arranged a meeting to address these issues directly with her sister and Brenda. Filled with gratitude for Denise's unwavering support and bolstered by our friendship of over 15 years, I left the hospital the next day and headed to a private dining room in a restaurant where a meeting had been set up. To my astonishment, I found Larry and Brenda already there, nonchalantly enjoying an expensive traditional meal. Larry, ever audacious, had the gall to remind me to bring money to pay for their meal. Firm in my resolve, I refused, instructing them to settle their bill, as I was there not to subsidize their lunch, but to assert my rights to the assets. Ignoring Larry's rude remarks, my lawyer and I took our seats at the table. We laid out the evidence clearly, legal documents and statements delineating Larry's faults and outlining the terms for the division of property. The papers made it clear that the responsibility for the dissolution of our marriage rested squarely on his shoulders, and I was prepared to defend my interests rigorously. After my hospitalization, a critical meeting took place in a private dining room of a local restaurant involving myself, Larry, Brenda, my lawyer, and unexpectedly, my long-lost friend Denise. As Larry and Brenda enjoyed their meal, unaware of the confrontation that awaited, my lawyer and I presented a series of damning photographs. These photos, taken by Denise, captured Larry and Brenda together, and even more shockingly, Brenda entering a hotel with another man. The surprise and guilt on their faces were palpable as they halted their meal. Denise chose that exact moment to make her entrance, confirming her role in capturing the images. Brenda was visibly bewildered to see her aunt involved. Denise, maintaining her loyalty to me, expressed her deep disappointment in Brenda's actions, but affirmed her desire to remain friends with me despite seeking compensation from her niece. In the heat of the confrontation, Brenda blurted out that she was pregnant, a claim that visibly shocked Larry. However, the claim quickly unraveled when Denise skeptically noted that Brenda showed no signs of pregnancy. Under pressure, Brenda admitted to fabricating the pregnancy story as a tactic to secure Larry's commitment, confessing her strategy of targeting affluent older men. Larry, finding himself in a web of lies and deceit, was left speechless. Denise, taking charge of the situation, led a remorseful Brenda away, promising a more formal apology letter. Left alone with me, Larry scrambled to salvage our relationship, pleading for a fresh start and lamenting his deception of Brenda. He even tried to leverage my lack of recent work experience to suggest I couldn't manage alone. I firmly rejected his advances, revealing my substantial personal net worth, estimated at around $10 million, acquired through inheritance funds he had no claim over as they were not marital assets. With my financial independence assured, I reiterated my intention to proceed with the divorce. The fallout from this revelation was swift. Brenda, under pressure from her family, transferred a sum of money into my account as a form of compensation, and her mother ensured she worked to make amends. Larry, now estranged from his own family and facing severe repercussions, was dismissed from his job for his indiscretions and resorted to multiple construction jobs to manage his debts. With the divorce finalized, I redirected the funds I received to charity and relocated to the countryside to start anew. Meanwhile, Denise and I rekindled our friendship, making plans to remain single, live together, and indulge in our shared passion for food and travel. We looked forward to beginning our new life, embarking on culinary tours, and taking short trips, celebrating our freedom and the enduring strength of our friendship. Excitement fills me as I prepare for a future where I can live joyfully and authentically, true to myself. This is the tale of how my life was completely turned upside down twice, and my name is Emily. I suppose I ought to begin at the beginning. In a tiny suburban town, I was born to devoted parents, Larry and Joanna David. My mother was a nurse, and my father was a journalist. Although we were poor, we were content. Before I was 14, my life was rather typical. After that, everything changed. My folks were traveling home from a dinner party on a wet Friday night. The phone rang as my granny and I were watching a ridiculous cartoon at home. I will never forget the shiver that shot down my spine upon hearing my grandmother sob quietly in the kitchen. The days that followed were a haze. Mom had perished instantly in the crash. They told us. Dad made it through, but not by much. He was only a shadow of the man I knew when I saw him for the first time in the hospital. With his legs crushed, the doctor said he would never walk normally. Whispering, "Emily," he reached for my hand and said, "I'm so sorry, sweetie. I truly apologize." I didn't know why he was expressing regret. He wasn't at blame. Their car had been hit by an inebriated driver. But as I grew older, I came to understand that he was sorry for our circumstances, the challenges ahead, my mother's passing, and the father he felt he could no longer be. However, my father, Larry David, underestimated his own strength. Once he was discharged from the hospital and got used to living in a wheelchair, he gave his work his all. He was an accomplished writer who now devoted all of his energies to his work as an editor at the city's leading newspaper. Dad made sure I had what I needed as I approached adolescence. He urged me to get involved in clubs, meet people, and lead a typical life. In all honesty, I liked to spend time with him more. He helped me with my homework, we argued about books, and we watched old films together. Dad insisted I go away to school when it was time for me to attend college. "You need to spread your wings, kiddo," he stated. "Kindly forget about me. I'll be all right." Though I was hesitant, I decided to enroll in college since I knew he was right. I studied accounting at the State University of New York. I met Emma there, and she ended up being my best friend. I got to know Paul, her second cousin, through Emma. Paul was witty and polite, and when I told him about my dad, he didn't bat an eyelash. He actually hit it off with Dad the first time he saw him, instantly connecting over their love of vintage rock. Paul told me later, "You're amazing for taking care of your dad all these years, and your dad is cool." I attempted to hide the fact that I was shining on the inside. For the first time since the accident, I began to believe that one day I would actually be able to lead a regular life, one filled with love, laughter, and perhaps even my own family. After graduation, everything began to fit together like a puzzle. Paul started working as a long-haul truck driver, and I was hired by the local tax agency. After 4 years of dating, on a cool autumn evening in the park, where we went on our first date, he asked me to marry him. Though I was ecstatic, there was one thing I should clarify. "Yes, Paul, but I'm unable to part from my dad. I'm needed by him." Paul smiled wide and said, "I wouldn't have it any other way. We'll all live together. Your dad's apartment is big enough for the 3 of us, right?" The wedding was small but beautiful. Dad insisted on wheeling himself down the aisle to give me away. There wasn't a dry eye in the place as I stood there holding Paul's hand. I felt like I was living a fairy tale, but every fairy tale has its villains, and mine came in the form of my mother-in-law, Mar, and my sister-in-law, Olivia. From the moment I met them, I could tell they didn't approve of me. "So your father is handicapped?" Maria asked during our first meeting, wrinkling her nose as if she smelled something bad. "He's disabled," I corrected, trying to stay calm. "But he works as an editor." "How nice," she interrupted, clearly not interested. Then she turned to Paul and asked, "Are you sure about this? There are so many nice girls from good families." I felt my face flush with anger and embarrassment, but Paul immediately defended me. "Mom, Emily is from a good family. Her dad's disability doesn't change that. I love her, and that's all that matters." That shut Maria up, but I could still see the disapproval in her eyes. Olivia, following her mother's lead, was just as cold towards me. After the wedding, true to his word, Paul moved in with Dad and me, and our life settled into a comfortable routine. I'd go to work at the tax office while Paul was on the road for days at a time. When he was home, we'd all have dinner together. But whenever Maria and Olivia visited, the atmosphere in our home changed. They acted like they owned the place, barely acknowledging Dad's presence. Once I overheard Maria whispering to Olivia, "It's a shame. Paul could have done so much better. Now he's stuck with this girl and her crippled father. What if they have children? Can you imagine the genes?" I was furious, but I kept quiet for Paul's sake. I tried to keep the peace, but it was getting harder and harder. One evening, after a particularly tense visit from Maria and Olivia, I broke down in tears. Paul found me in our bedroom, crying. Hey, he said, pulling me into his arms. "What's wrong?" "Your mom and sister," I sobbed. "They hate me. They think I'm not good enough for you because of Dad." Paul's face hardened. "That's ridiculous. You and your dad are my family now. If they can't accept that, it's their problem, not ours." His words comforted me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of our troubles with Maria and Olivia. As the months went by, Paul's trucking business began to grow. He was always on the road, traveling across the country in his big rig. I missed him terribly when he was gone, but I focused on my work at the tax office and spent my evenings keeping Dad company. One crisp autumn evening, as I was helping Dad into bed, Paul called. His voice crackled with excitement over the phone. "Emily, I've been thinking," he said. "How would you feel about buying a townhouse? It would be easier for your dad to move around in a wheelchair. He could spend more time outside. Plus, you could have a garden, something to keep you busy when I'm on the road." The more he talked, the more I liked the idea. I glanced at Dad, who was pretending not to be interested. "What do you think, Dad?" I asked, putting the phone on speaker. Dad's eyes lit up. "A garden would be nice," he admitted. "And it would be easier to get outside." That settled it. Over the next few weeks, we threw ourselves into house hunting. We finally found the perfect place, a spacious townhouse with wide doorways, a roll-in shower for Dad, and a beautiful backyard. Taking out a mortgage was scary, but with Paul's income, mine, and the rent from Dad's old apartment, we managed to make it work. We moved in on a sunny Sunday in spring, and I'll never forget the look on Dad's face as he wheeled himself out onto our new patio. "This is perfect, sweetie," he said, his eyes misty. "Thank you." We spent the next few months settling in and making the place our own. I planted a small vegetable garden, and Dad would sit outside for hours, enjoying the sunshine and fresh air. It was peaceful, almost perfect. Then we decided to have a housewarming party. We invited friends, colleagues, and yes, even Maria and Olivia. The party was in full swing when they showed up fashionably late as usual. They walked in, looking around with barely hidden envy. As we walked through the house, I could see Maria thinking about something. When we reached the master bedroom, she turned to me with a sly smile. "You know, Emily," she said quietly, "this would be perfect for Paul and me. Why don't you send your father to a nursing home? Then I could move in here." I felt like I'd been slapped. "Excuse me," I managed to say. "Oh, don't look so shocked," Maria continued. "Your father isn't well. He's not a whole person anymore, is he? He doesn't need all this luxury. A nursing home would be more than enough for someone in his condition." Before I could respond, Maria marched out to the patio where Dad was talking with some guests. To my horror, she grabbed the handles of his wheelchair and started pushing him toward the driveway. "Maria," I shouted, running after her. "What are you doing?" "If he won't go to a nursing home, he can stay outside," she sneered. "That's what you wanted, isn't it? For him to be outdoors." I was shaking with rage and disbelief. Thankfully, Paul heard the commotion and came running. His face turned red with anger when he saw what his mother was doing. "Mom," he yelled, "what the hell are you doing? Let go of Larry's chair right now." Maria looked shocked by Paul's tone, but honey, I was just. "I don't want to hear it." Paul cut her off. "You and Olivia need to leave now." After they left, Paul apologized over and over to Dad and me. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I had no idea she would do that. I'm just so sorry." Dad reached out and patted Paul's hand. "It's not your fault, son," he said gently. "Some people just can't understand." Life settled into a new routine after that incident. Maria and Olivia kept their distance, which was fine with me. Paul focused on his work, taking on more long-haul routes to help pay for our new home. I split my time between my job at the tax office, taking care of our home, and looking after Dad. 4 years passed quickly. Our life became comfortable and predictable. Paul was on the road most of the time, but when he was home, our little family was happy. Dad's health was stable, and he seemed content spending his days in the garden or working on his editing from home. Then came the call that shattered my world. I was at work when my phone rang. A man's unfamiliar voice greeted me. "Mrs. Walker, this is Officer Andrew from the Highway Patrol." My heart sank. Yes, I barely managed to say. "I'm sorry to inform you that your husband, Paul Walker, has been in a serious accident." The rest of the conversation was a blur. Words like head-on collision and didn't make it floated around me, but I couldn't understand them. It wasn't until I heard myself thanking the officer and hanging up that the reality began to hit me. Paul was gone. The next week was a fog of grief and disbelief. I went through the motions of planning the funeral like a robot, barely understanding what was happening. The day before the funeral, I gathered my courage and called Maria. I thought she deserved to hear about her son's death from me, not from a newspaper obituary. "Hello," Maria's sharp voice answered. "Maria, it's Emily," I said, my voice trembling. "It's about Paul. He's gone. There was an accident." There was silence on the other end of the line, and then, to my shock, Maria's voice came back dripping with anger. "This is your fault," she hissed. "You made him work so hard, driving that truck to pay for your fancy house. You've killed my son." I was stunned. "Maria, Save it," she snapped. "I expect you to give him the best funeral money can buy, but don't expect a penny from us. You made your bed, now lie in it." The line went dead. I stood there, phone in hand, tears streaming down my face. How could she be so cruel? How could she blame me for this? The day of Paul's funeral was gray and rainy, matching my mood perfectly. The church was full. Paul was well liked in the community, and it seemed like half the town had come to pay their respects. After the service, as people passed by to offer their condolences, I noticed that Paul's mother and sister were nowhere to be seen. They hadn't even bothered to show up for their own son and brother's funeral. Dad reached out and squeezed my hand. "It's their loss, sweetie. We're family, and we'll get through this together." As we pulled into our driveway, something seemed off. The lights were on in the house, which was strange because I was sure I had turned everything off before we left. "Did you leave any lights on, Dad?" I asked, frowning. He shook his head. "No, I don't think so." As we got closer, I noticed movement inside the house. My heart started pounding. Were we being robbed on the day of Paul's funeral? I quickly helped Dad out of the car and into his wheelchair, my mind racing. Should I call the police? But as we approached the front door, I heard familiar voices inside. A chill ran down my spine as I recognized them. I pushed open the door to find Maria and Olivia in our living room, surrounded by boxes and pieces of furniture. What the hell is going on here? I demanded my grief, momentarily forgotten in the face of this outrageous intrusion. Maria turned to me, her face a mask of fake sympathy. "Oh, Emily dear, we're just helping you pack up. After all, you can't possibly afford to keep this place now that Paul is gone." I was speechless. Olivia added, her voice sickeningly sweet, "Don't worry. You can go back to your father's apartment. It's cozy." I could feel the anger building inside me. "Get out," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Get out of my house right now." Maria had the nerve to look offended. "This house belongs to us now. All of Paul's property does. We're his family after all." "Like hell you are." I exploded. "Where were you today at his funeral?" "Oh, that's right. You couldn't be bothered to show up." Maria waved her hand dismissively. "We were busy making arrangements. Now be a good girl and start packing. We'll meet you out by tomorrow." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. These women hadn't shed a tear for Paul, hadn't even attended his funeral, and now they were trying to kick us out of our home. "I'm calling the police," I said, pulling out my phone. Maria and Olivia exchanged worried looks. They clearly hadn't expected me to fight back. "Now, Emily," Maria began, but I cut her off. "No, you have exactly 10 minutes to get out of my house before I call the cops. This is my home. Paul and I bought it together. You have no right to be here." Maybe it was the steel in my voice or the fire in my eyes, but Maria and Olivia finally realized they had gone too far. They gathered their things and left, but not before Maria turned to me with a sneer. "This isn't over, Emily. You'll be hearing from our lawyers." The days after Paul's funeral were a blur of grief, anxiety, and paperwork. I threw myself into sorting out Paul's affairs, partly to keep busy and partly out of fear that Maria and Olivia would try to take what wasn't theirs. A week after the funeral, I received a call from a local law firm. My heart pounded as I answered the call, afraid it was Maria following through on her threat of legal action. "Mrs. Walker," a crisp professional voice asked. "This is Scott Thompson from Thompson and Partners. I'm calling about your late husband's will." I felt a small flicker of hope. His will? I didn't know he had one. "Yes, ma'am. Mr. Walker came to see us about 5 months ago. He asked that we contact you in the event of his passing." I scheduled an appointment for the next day, my mind spinning. Why hadn't Paul told me about this? What did it mean? The next morning, I wheeled Dad into Mr. Thompson's office. The lawyer greeted us warmly, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners. "Mrs. Walker, Mr. David, thank you for coming in," he said, gesturing for us to sit near his desk. "I'm sorry for your loss." Mr. Thompson opened a file on his desk. "Now, as I mentioned on the phone, your husband came to see us to draft his will. He was very clear about his wishes." I held my breath as Mr. Thompson began to read. "I, Paul Walker, being of sound mind, do hereby leave all my worldly possessions to my beloved wife, Emily Walker." I gasped, and Dad's grip on my hand tightened. Mr. Thompson continued, "This includes our home, my truck, and all our savings. It is my wish that Emily use these resources to care for herself and her father, Larry David, whom I have come to love as my own." Tears streamed down my face. Even from beyond the grave, Paul was taking care of us. "There's more," Mr. Thompson said gently. "Mr. Walker left a letter for you." He handed me an envelope. With shaking hands, I opened it and began to read. "My dear Emily, if you're reading this, It means I'm gone. I'm so sorry for leaving you and Larry. Please know that you two are the best thing that ever happened to me. I made this will because I know how my mother and sister can be. I didn't want to worry you, but I needed to make sure you and Larry were protected if anything happened to me. You're my real family, Emily, you and Larry, not them. Take care of each other, live your lives to the fullest, and know that I'll always be watching over you. All my love, Paul. I clutched the letter to my chest, sobbing. Dad was crying too, his weathered hand patting my arm. Mr. Thompson gave us a moment before speaking again. Mrs. Walker, there's one more thing. Your husband's truck was insured. Given the circumstances of the accident, the insurance company will be paying out the full value of the policy. I looked up, sniffling, and asked, "What does that mean?" Mr. Thompson gave me a small smile and said, "It means you'll be receiving a large sum of money, enough to pay off your mortgage and more." As we left the lawyer's office, I felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. We were going to be okay. Paul had made sure of it. As we pulled into our driveway, I noticed a familiar car parked on the street. My heart sank as I recognized Maria's sleek sedan. "Oh no," I muttered. "What now?" Sure enough, Maria and Olivia were waiting on our front porch. But this time, I wasn't afraid. I had Paul's letter in my pocket and the strength of his love in my heart. "Emily," Maria began as we approached, her voice sickly sweet, "we need to talk about Paul's estate." I stood tall, looking her straight in the eye. "No, Maria, we don't. Paul left everything to me. It's all legal and official. And you want to know why? Because we were his real family, not you. Now please leave. You're trespassing on my property." For once, Maria was speechless. Olivia tugged at her arm, whispering urgently. With one last venomous glare, they got in their car and drove away. The weeks after our meeting with the lawyer were busy. I threw myself into settling Paul's affairs, grateful for the distraction from my grief. The insurance payout came through, and just as Mr. Thompson had said, it was enough to pay off our mortgage with plenty left over. One afternoon, as I was going through Paul's desk, I found a small notebook. Curious, I opened it and saw pages filled with his messy handwriting. It was a journal of sorts, full of his thoughts and plans for our future. One entry read, "Thinking about starting a college fund for our future kids. I want to make sure they have the best start in life." My heart clenched. We had talked about having children someday, but had decided to wait until we were more financially stable. Now, reading Paul's private hopes and dreams, I felt a fresh wave of grief wash over me. "Oh, Paul," I whispered, holding the notebook close. We had so many plans. That night, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. My mind kept drifting to the journal, to the future we'd never have. When I finally drifted off, I dreamed of Paul. He was smiling, holding out his hand to me. "It's okay, Emily," he said in my dream. "Everything's going to be all right." I woke up the next morning feeling different. I couldn't quite figure out what it was, but something had changed. As I got ready for work, a wave of nausea hit me, and I barely made it to the bathroom in time. The morning sickness didn't go away in the days that followed. At first, I thought it was just stress and grief, but a small voice in the back of my mind suggested something else. After a week of this, I found myself in the pharmacy, staring at pregnancy tests with trembling hands. I bought one and hurried home. The 5 minutes I waited for the result felt like the longest of my life. When I finally looked at the test, there were 2 clear blue lines. I sank to the bathroom floor, overwhelmed by a mix of emotions: joy, fear, grief, and hope, all swirling together. "Emily." Dad's voice came through the door. "Everything okay in there?" I opened the door, tears streaming down my face. Dad's expression changed from concern to alarm. "What's wrong, sweetie?" he asked. I held up the test, my hand shaking. "I'm pregnant, Dad." I fell into his arms, sobbing. He held me, stroking my hair like he used to when I was a little girl. "It's okay," he murmured. "It's going to be okay. You're not alone, Emily. And this baby is a gift." His words hit me deeply. This baby was a part of Paul, a continuation of our love. Suddenly, the fear began to fade, replaced by a strong determination. "You're right," I said, wiping my eyes. "This baby is a gift, and we're going to be okay." Dad smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "That's my girl. Now let's get you something to eat. You're eating for two now, after all." As we headed to the kitchen, I felt a sense of hope growing inside me. The road ahead would be challenging, but with my father by my side and Paul's child growing inside me, I knew we could face anything. As my belly grew with our child, I found strength I never knew I had. Dad was my rock, always there with a kind word or a helping hand. We settled into a new routine, just the two of us, eagerly waiting for the arrival of the newest member of our little family. One sunny afternoon, as I was tending to the garden Dad and I had planted together, I heard a car pull up. My heart sank as I recognized Maria's sit-in. What could they possibly want now? I walked to the front of the house, one hand instinctively resting on my swollen belly. Maria and Olivia stood on our porch, looking both comfortable and slightly desperate. "Emily," Maria began, her voice missing its usual sharpness, "we need to talk to you." I raised an eyebrow but said nothing, waiting for her to continue. Olivia spoke up, her eyes darting around nervously. "We've hit some hard times. We were wondering if we could stay in your father's old apartment, just until we get back on our feet." I was hearing things that I couldn't believe. They dared to ask for more after everything they had made us go through. Saying in a calm yet forceful voice, "I'm sorry, that isn't achievable. I would like to stop talking to you." Maria's shocked and disgusted expression contorted as her eyes tightened at my growing baby bulge. She shouted, "You're pregnant. Yet, you tiny whore. It's unbelievable that you've already found someone else. Paul's corpse remains warm even in the earth." Anger shot through me, but I swallowed it. Not bothering to explain that it was Paul's kid, I did not. I didn't want such a grandmother and aunt for my child. Rather, I gave Maria a shy, sly smile that seemed to make her feel even more uneasy. I answered gently, "My personal life is none of your business. Now I think it's time for you to leave." Maria seemed to want to add more, but she must have been stopped by something in my expression. She pivoted on her heel and seized Olivia's limb. I felt a wave of tranquility go over me as I watched them drive off. I had maintained my dignity, stood my ground, and shielded my family. Paul could have felt pleased with himself. My name is Laura. I am a 27-year-old woman who recently separated from my spouse Larry and had to navigate life as a freshly divorced person. We took the same classes in college, which is where our love story started, and we fell in love right away. Although we shared a close bond, there was a constant cloud over our relationship. Lily, Larry's mother, had always seemed to have an unexplained hate for me. She constantly tried to get in our way, gave me unwanted advice, and made me feel uncomfortable. I told Larry about my worries numerous times, but he found it difficult to speak with his mother. He struggled to balance his love for me with his allegiance to her. I finally accepted that I would have to put up with Lily's critiques, thinking that perhaps Larry had been inadvertently disclosing too much to her, which gave her justification to be critical of me. We often argued over his mother's influence, which created a lot of difficulties in our relationship. Larry eventually came to see things from my point of view and stopped giving her access to the personal secrets of our lives. To Lily's dismay, we were married after 5 years of dating. For a while, we were able to keep our distance from her toxic presence in spite of her attempts to ruin our marriage. It was around this time that Larry and I both achieved professional success. I was proud of Larry's achievements, but I also began to need something more intimate, something that was just mine. I didn't mind that we had divided our expenses unevenly, with me bearing the lion's share of the cost. The desire to pursue something creative and satisfying was what really bothered me, along with the growing hole I felt inside. I made the decision to investigate graphic design as a side project by drawing on my love of design. It developed into a side project that I could call my own. I nursed it subtly for a time while I considered its potential outcomes. I made the bold decision to enroll in graphic design classes and buy equipment on my own without telling Larry. I only confided in Mary, my dearest friend, about this new endeavor. She was quite helpful and gave me advice that was both realistic and encouraging. Mary helped me improve my abilities and boost my self-esteem, and she introduced me to employers who were considering hiring me. They trusted me with their projects and valued my work, even though I was just starting out, which helped me progressively develop a clientele. Our lives were greatly improved by this new source of money, which relieved our financial burdens and allowed Larry and me to live more comfortably. With each paycheck, I saved a portion, dreaming of surprising Larry with something special as a token of my appreciation for his support. However, I hadn't mentioned any of this to him yet, and every time I thought about bringing it up, it seemed like he was avoiding serious conversations. It wasn't long before I noticed something was off. Larry became increasingly distant, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something from me. The first real sign of trouble came when Larry admitted that he had spent his entire paycheck on investments just a week after receiving it. We had a heated argument about it, but we managed to patch things up for the time being. To help make ends meet, I put in extra hours at work, which helped relieve some of the financial strain. But the following month, Larry repeated the same behavior, and I found myself feeling more and more frustrated. I couldn't understand how he could be so careless with his earnings, especially when I was working so hard to contribute to the household. In a moment of anger, I lashed out with hurtful words, though I quickly regretted my outburst. However, when Larry once again found himself without money for the 5th month in a row, I reached my breaking point. I had been meticulously managing our finances, working tirelessly not just at my day job, but also on my growing graphic design business, which was becoming our main source of income. It was becoming clear that something had to change, and I couldn't keep carrying the burden alone. I had reached my limit. How could you let this happen again? Have you learned nothing? I scolded Larry, my frustration boiling over. Despite his attempts to justify his actions, I was done bearing the weight of his financial irresponsibility. It was a tough decision, but I made it clear that I wasn't going to bail him out this time. Larry reacted with indignation and defensiveness, but I stood firm. You can't gamble away your entire paycheck and expect me to cover for you, I asserted. I won't enable this behavior any longer. Our argument quickly escalated with accusations flying back and forth until finally Larry stormed out, leaving me alone to grapple with the turmoil of our crumbling relationship. In the aftermath of our confrontation, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Larry's behavior than met the eye. Suspicion began to creep in, and I wondered if Lily, his overbearing mother, might be involved. Determined to uncover the truth, I decided to do some investigating while Larry was out. It didn't take long for me to find what I was looking for. Larry had carelessly left his bank account logged in on my laptop, and what I discovered shocked me. Contrary to his claims of being broke, Larry had more than enough money squirreled away. As I scrutinized his transactions, I found nothing unusual, just the usual debits and credits. But I couldn't understand why he had been hiding his finances from me and telling lies. Seeking clarity, I delved into his messages, and the first person I noticed him texting was his mother, Lily. Their conversation revolved around our recent altercation, with Larry painting me as the antagonist, claiming I had berated him for withholding money. Lily seemed to revel in the discord, affirming her suspicions about me. As I scrolled further, I uncovered a disturbing revelation. Lily had been relentlessly disparaging me to Larry, labeling me as materialistic, and insinuating that I was only with him for financial gain. Ironically, I was the primary breadwinner in our household. Their exchanges showed how Lily's toxic influence had fueled Larry's grievances against me, magnifying minor annoyances and nurturing his resentment. The final blow came when I realized just how deeply Lily's words had seeped into Larry's mind, twisting his perception of our relationship and turning him against me. The truth was out, and it left me reeling. When I discovered their scheme to cut me off financially, it felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. Initially hesitant, Larry gradually gave in to Lily's manipulations, slowly yielding to her demands. He unknowingly provided her with more ammunition by sharing moments where I had expressed my frustrations, further fueling her animosity toward me. This betrayal was devastating, leaving me overwhelmed with hurt and confusion. Unsure of my next steps, I turned to my best friend Mary, seeking solace in her comforting presence. I confided in her, revealing the distressing truth I had uncovered, desperately seeking her guidance in this tumultuous moment. Mary, ever the steadfast confidant, listened intently, offering her unwavering support as I struggled to process the betrayal inflicted by those closest to me. The situation weighed heavily on me, and I found myself at a crossroads, uncertain of the best course of action. It seemed glaringly obvious to cut off Larry's support, wait for him to hit rock bottom, and then file for divorce. But Mary questioned the morality of such a plan, suggesting that it might be too harsh. Her concern prompted me to reconsider my approach, and she advised me to sleep on it and revisit the issue the next day. Exhausted both physically and emotionally, I welcomed the respite that sleep promised. The next morning, with the luxury of a weekend ahead, Mary and I decided to find comfort in the familiarity of a favorite movie. We drifted off to sleep in each other's company, the tranquility of the day offering a temporary sense of peace, a brief reprieve from the turmoil brewing within me. We indulged in simple pleasures, immersing ourselves in movies, enjoying culinary delights, and savoring each other's company. Despite the nagging thoughts of the previous day's revelations, I made a conscious effort to set them aside, prioritizing the much-needed break from the stress and heartache I had been experiencing. However, our peaceful reprieve was short-lived. A call from Lily shattered the calm. Reluctantly, I answered, only to be met with accusations and hostility. Her unwarranted attacks only served to heighten the tension, but with Mary's encouragement, I managed to maintain my composure amidst Lily's vitriol. Then, amidst the hostility, an unexpected proposal emerged. A 40-60th split of everything between Larry and me. It was a proposition that dripped with skepticism, clearly a test of my commitment to the marriage. Despite the audacity of her demand, it left me contemplating the next steps in what was becoming an increasingly difficult and painful situation. I agreed, willing to explore any possibility of salvaging what was left of our relationship. With a tentative acceptance, we set plans in motion, culminating in a scheduled meeting on Friday to formalize the arrangement. Despite the lingering uncertainty, I resolved to face the challenge head-on, armed with newfound determination to navigate the tumultuous waters ahead. I was stunned by the turn my marriage had taken, caught between disbelief and seething anger. How could Lily brand me a gold digger? And how could Larry stand by and allow such an accusation? I had stood by him through thick and thin, supporting his endeavors even when they led to losses. I had covered for him when he lied and shouldered the burden of our shared responsibilities, all while keeping my own side hustle a secret, waiting for the right moment to reveal it. When I shared the details with Mary, her smile hinted at the brilliance of the plan. Splitting everything evenly would leave Larry with little to fall back on, given his lack of awareness about my additional income. I had initially hoped to surprise him with a lavish gift once my side venture gained traction, but now I was simply grateful to have it as a safety net. Friday arrived quickly, and Mary accompanied me for support. When we arrived home, we found Lily, Larry, and a lawyer already there, finalizing the contract. Ignoring Larry's silent plea for privacy, I approached Lily and demanded to review the terms. As expected, the agreement mandated an equal division of assets, with a clause prohibiting financial assistance between us. Reluctantly, I signed, knowing it would leave Larry scrambling financially. Predictably, problems ensued. Initially, our communication was limited to curt words, the rift between us too deep to bridge. Yet living under the same roof required some level of interaction. Larry attempted to reach out and mend the divide, but I remained distant, resentful of his complacency in the situation. As time passed, Larry's persistent attempts to reconnect grew tiresome. The weight of our fractured relationship hung heavily over us, and I found it increasingly difficult to maintain my resolve. Despite everything, the reality of our situation was sinking in, and I knew that the path forward would not be easy. "I just need to know where your loyalty lies, Laura," Larry implored. "Despite all the issues caused by your mother, you still choose to side with her. Is this truly what you believe is best for us? Please, Larry, don't speak ill of my mother like that. And what wealth are you so concerned about?" "I don't understand," I countered, feeling both confused and hurt. "I'm simply trying to make things right between us. Can we not lash out at each other? There will be no reconciliation until that contract is null and void," Larry replied defensively. "It's only been 3 weeks since we signed it, and I've seen no evidence to suggest you're not here for the money. If you're struggling financially, just let me know. I'm willing to help." I offered, trying to bridge the gap between us. I said, "Wouldn't that be a breach of the contract? I won't risk violating it." "Why are you making this so difficult? Can't we just be civil?" I added. I could see Larry wrestling with conflicting influences, his mother's and his own. The Larry I married wouldn't have succumbed to such manipulation. I focused on paying off our major debts, leaving Larry to manage on his own. With my share settled, I had more disposable income, and Mary and I indulged in lavish outings. While Larry always had an excuse for his financial constraints, my graphic design sidekick was thriving, and I began to seriously consider quitting my day job. Meanwhile, Larry struggled. His portion of the pantry was often bare. While a part of me felt sympathy for him, I couldn't ignore the choices he had made that led us here. I reminded myself that Larry had brought this situation upon himself, but that didn't make the unfolding events any easier to handle. Lily's unexpected visit, however, threw me off balance. She stormed into my home, her face a mask of anger. Before I could even greet her, she accused me of stealing from Larry. The words hit me like a slap in the face. Not only was I confused, but I was also immediately on the defensive. How could she possibly think I was stealing from my own husband? "What are you talking about?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. "You're accusing me of seeking revenge on Larry because I don't like the contract he made. That's absurd. Your son has been struggling all month, but it's not because I've been stealing his money to fund my outings. He has no money to steal, and you know it. And let's not forget who actually coerced us into signing that contract in the first place. You forced it upon us, and now your son is paying the price." Lily's eyes narrowed, and I could see her temper flaring. "Liar," she shouted. "I'm calling the police right now." "Go ahead," I replied, meeting her gaze head-on. "I haven't taken a single cent from your son. You won't find anything because there's nothing to find." "Then how do you have so much money?" she demanded, not backing down. "Your job doesn't pay that much more than Larry's, and he's told me you've cut back your hours. So where's all this money coming from?" I took a deep breath, deciding that now was the time to lay it all out. "I have another business on the side," I began. "A graphic design venture that I've been working on for a while now. I was planning to surprise Larry with it to show him what I'd accomplished, but thanks to your constant meddling, that plan went down the drain. I was even going to use the money to buy you a car as a gesture of goodwill to show you that I'm not the person you think I am." Lily looked taken aback, but she wasn't ready to relent just yet. "How much do you make from this side business?" she asked, her voice laced with suspicion. "More than you'd expect," I answered. "I've worked hard to build something successful, something I'm proud of. All this time, I wasn't lying or trying to deceive anyone. I was simply trying to do something good, something positive. And now, thanks to your interference, everything I've worked for has been jeopardized. If you care so much about your son, maybe you should be the one supporting him instead of tearing down everything I've built." With that, I took a deep breath and reached into my bag, pulling out a set of divorce papers that I had been holding onto for this moment. The sight of them seemed to take Lily by surprise, but I was beyond caring about her reaction. I turned to Larry, who had been standing silently by, his expression a mix of guilt and resignation. "I didn't want it to come to this, Larry," I said, my voice softening as I addressed him. "I tried to make things work, even after everything that's happened. But I can't keep doing this. I can't keep living under the shadow of your mother's influence, and I can't keep pretending that everything is okay when it's not. I've worked hard to build a life for myself, and I deserve to be with someone who supports that, not someone who lets their mother tear us apart." Larry looked down, unable to meet my eyes. Lily opened her mouth to say something, but I cut her off before she could start. "This isn't just about money," I continued. "It's about respect, trust, and the foundation of a relationship that should have been built on mutual support. I've done everything I can to support you, Larry, even when things were tough. But I need to take care of myself now. I need to protect what I've built." With those words, I handed the divorce papers to Larry. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the weight of everything that had led us to this point. Lily looked at the papers, then at Larry, her face a mask of disbelief. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, and the road ahead would be filled with challenges. But I also knew that I couldn't keep sacrificing my own happiness and well-being for the sake of a relationship that was no longer healthy. As I turned to leave, I felt a sense of finality, but also a sense of relief. I had taken the steps I needed to protect myself, and now it was time to move forward. Whatever the future held, I was ready to face it on my own terms. I had filed for divorce right after we signed the contract, quietly holding on to the papers until the right moment to reveal them. When I finally handed them to Larry, the shock on his face was unmistakable, but I felt no sympathy. I had given him every chance to make things right, and he had chosen his path. I expected Lily to be pleased, given how hard she had pushed for this separation. Instead, her expression shifted to one of fury as she realized the full consequences this would have for her son. I calmly informed them that I would be moving out. In the last weeks, I had made up my mind, and there was no going back. I agreed to continue splitting the remaining loan payments, but that was the extent of my commitment. Larry, clearly desperate, tried to plead with me, hoping to change my mind. But I remained resolute. I reminded him that this was the outcome of his choices and actions, and that we had both reached a point of no return. In the months that followed, I began to feel a sense of liberation from the toxic relationship that had been weighing me down for so long. Lily, as expected, tried to contest the divorce, likely hoping to salvage something from the situation. However, with our assets already legally separated, there was little for Larry to gain from the proceedings. In fact, he ended up losing more than he ever imagined. Unable to keep up with the mortgage payments on the house, he was forced to sell it and move back in with his mother. As for me, my life took a turn for the better. My graphic design business began to flourish far beyond what I had initially envisioned. I started landing lucrative opportunities with big brands, and my client base expanded rapidly. It was a blissful and rewarding period for me, one that filled me with a sense of accomplishment and relief. I finally felt like I was in control of my life, free from the negativity and constant stress that had overshadowed my marriage. Every day, I felt grateful that I had something to fall back on. My side business, which had started as a small venture, had grown into a successful and profitable enterprise. This financial independence spared me from the fate Larry had to endure and allowed me to move forward without the burden of our past weighing me down. Larry's situation was quite different. With the household and his financial stability shattered, he struggled to adjust. Moving back in with his mother was a blow to his pride, and I could only hope that this experience would serve as a lesson for him in the future. Perhaps he would learn the importance of responsibility, trust, and the consequences of allowing others to manipulate his decisions. But those lessons were no longer my concern. I was focused on building my own future now. I embraced the opportunities that lay ahead, excited about what was to come. The freedom to pursue my passions, the success of my business, and the peace that came with leaving a toxic situation behind filled me with a sense of fulfillment I hadn't felt in years. Life was finally moving in a positive direction, and I was determined to make the most of it. I surrounded myself with friends who were there for me, people like Mary, who had supported me through good times and bad. Knowing that this new chapter in my life was only the beginning, we celebrated both the little and large successes together. I became aware of my progress and growth as I looked back. My past traumatizing events have made me a stronger, more resilient person. I was no longer the woman who had let other people control and overwhelm her. I was a different person today, someone who valued independence, someone who knew her worth, and someone who was confident enough to face the world. I was prepared to welcome the bright future with open arms. I was free to follow my aspirations and live my life as I saw fit, free from the mistakes and betrayals of the past. And that was the most satisfying aspect of the entire trip, above anything else. This is one of the infrequent instances when I feel obligated to share. I handle problems in private most of the time because they're not that serious. But this one has gotten rather complicated. Allow me to retell the entire story from the beginning. Bobby, my spouse, is very close to his family, particularly his parents, in our home. He is so devoted to them that he complies with all of their demands without hesitation. Though he is blind to it, his persistent reliance on and confidence in his family is starting to cause problems. He always responds dismissively and with annoyance when I try to talk to him about this. The main problem here is that Bobby has always overindulged in his parents' requests from the beginning, which is why I'm coming to this forum for guidance. I can appreciate the need to look after one's parents. If my parents were closer, I would definitely take the same care of them. But Bobby seems to be ignoring the fact that there ought to be sensible boundaries. Since we both began earning steady incomes, his parents have frequently requested money from us. It's not that they are struggling financially. They are quite comfortable and can afford various luxuries on their own. Initially, I was sympathetic because they were Bobby's parents, and I recognized the need to integrate them into our lives. But as time passed, my discomfort grew. We sent them a substantial sum over the years, enough that we could have financed a couple of international vacations with these savings. I've tried to convey to Bobby that while we live comfortably, it's unwise to funnel all our extra resources to his parents, as it leaves us with little savings for future needs, such as planning for children or making significant purchases. Initially, it seemed he grasped my perspective, but the discussion soon turned into an argument. He maintained that since we're living well, why shouldn't we help his parents with the extra money we have? This conversation isn't about refusing to support them. It's about balancing that support with our needs and future plans. I'm reaching out here in hopes of gaining some perspective on how to handle this delicate balance in our family dynamics. However, Bobby remains steadfast in his decision to continue financially supporting his parents. This stance of his left me furious to the point where I nearly walked out that night. My anger intensified as I recalled their past treatment of me. If they had been kind and made me feel like a genuine part of the family, perhaps I could have been more accommodating. Unfortunately, they were anything but welcoming. They never really accepted me as one of their own, and they weren't there for me when I needed them most. Back when Bobby and I were just starting, right after my graduation and not long after he began his career, we weren't in a strong financial position. We didn't have the means to buy a house. I vividly remember the day we sat down with my in-laws, poured out our struggles, and sought their help to begin our journey toward homeownership. However, their immediate response was a refusal. They didn't even pause to consider our request. Instead, they lectured us for an hour about adult responsibilities and the importance of saving, advice that felt more dismissive than helpful. Despite my frustration, I held my tongue, choosing to keep my thoughts to myself. It was disheartening to see them unwilling to assist their son. I resigned myself to accept their stance if Bobby was at peace with it. However, the issue resurfaced when I inherited a house from my mother about a year and a half ago. It was a lovely property, but it required significant renovations. We had saved some money, but not nearly enough for the necessary repairs. This repeated pattern of needing financial assistance and facing rejection from his parents, who continued to demand our financial support without reciprocity, put a strain on how I viewed our relationship dynamics. This ongoing financial tug-of-war highlighted a painful imbalance, their willingness to take from us without offering support in our times of need. Faced with the need to renovate the inherited house to make it livable, we approached my in-laws once more, hoping they might help us with a modest sum. However, they refused yet again. This time, they urged us to earn our own money and cease asking for theirs. They even went so far as to suggest I sell the house and invest in something actually useful, dismissing the house as something that looks like crap. Their words were a blow to me. This house wasn't just a structure, it was a cherished link to my mother. I bit back my hurt and anger at their harsh words, thinking it impolite to react at the moment, though part of me now wishes I had spoken up. Perhaps that might have curbed their blatant disregard. Undeterred by their rejection, I resolved to restore the house on my own. I worked tirelessly, scraping together funds and pouring my effort into renovations. Over time, as I began to earn more, managing the project became somewhat easier. After months of hard labor, the house was transformed into something wonderful, a home that I was immensely proud of, a true testament to my dedication. A few months later, I had the opportunity to showcase my efforts. I invited my in-laws over for dinner to celebrate my mother-in-law's birthday, by which time the house looked stunning. I had hoped the evening would go well, considering the usual dynamics of such gatherings and the pride I felt in my accomplishments. Whenever the topic isn't about money, conversations with my in-laws tend to be relatively peaceful. But when it comes to finances, there's hardly a moment free from discussion. On the day they visited to see the renovations, I could tell they were utterly surprised by the transformation of the house. As soon as they walked in, their eyes widened. Clearly, they hadn't expected such extensive improvements. Internally, I was amused by their reaction, knowing full well they hadn't anticipated that I'd go to such lengths. They showered the house with compliments, which at first felt flattering, yet it quickly became overwhelming as they meticulously inspected every corner, incessantly inquiring about the costs involved. Their curiosity might have been natural, especially since they knew our financial constraints and hadn't contributed financially. Nevertheless, their persistent questions seemed less about appreciation and more about gauging how much money we'd poured into the renovations. It felt intrusive and somewhat demeaning, as if the value of my efforts was reduced to mere figures. The dinner that night started smoothly, with enjoyable conversation. However, the atmosphere shifted when my mother-in-law steered the discussion toward dream vacations. She asked me about my ideal getaway, but her disinterest was palpable. She seemed to be merely waiting for me to finish. Her sudden excitement after my brief response felt contrived, which made me suspicious. It didn't take long for the true motive of their visit and all the peculiar behavior to surface. They wanted our help to finance a vacation home. After years of turning down our financial requests, here they were asking us to contribute to a luxury they desired, a vacation house. They wanted it despite being well off. Why they couldn't save for it themselves was beyond me. They assumed that because I had managed to refurbish my home beautifully, we must be wealthy. Their assumption was so far from the truth. When I probed further to understand their needs and the reasons behind their desire for a vacation home, their explanation was simply that they were bored with their lives and wanted a change of scenery on the weekends. I was astounded and frustrated by their entitlement. As I expressed that we didn't have funds to spare for such extravagances, Bobby's reaction shocked me further. He looked at me as if I had committed a great offense and sternly told me that spending on his parents' happiness was never a waste. His words and glare, suggesting I needed to watch what I say, were baffling and painful. This response underscored a deep-seated issue in our priorities and understanding of financial responsibility. Bobby knew deep down I was right. A vacation house is hardly a necessity, and it certainly isn't a matter of life and death. My father-in-law is still employed, and they have the means to save up for such luxury on their own, but it seemed they preferred to have us foot the bill for their comfort. Then it struck me, Bobby isn't an only child. He has an older brother, Jack. So why weren't they asking him for the money? When I brought this up, the atmosphere became tense. They seemed ready to make my life difficult. It turned out that Jack wasn't as financially stable, or so they claimed. They didn't want to burden him because, unlike us, he had children, and his expenses were primarily directed towards his family. I pointed out that Jack's financial situation was similar to ours. He earned roughly the same, but his funds were allocated to his children's needs. I mentioned our plans to start a family and how continuous financial support to my in-laws could jeopardize our ability to provide for potential future children. Their response was dismissive. Since we didn't have children yet, they argued we should have funds to spare. This soon morphed into emotional manipulation aimed not at me. They knew I wouldn't budge, but at Bobby. They lamented their loneliness and boredom now that both sons were occupied with their own families. They painted a vacation house as some sort of remedy for their supposed solitude, and Bobby, ever the dutiful son, was swayed by their emotional pleas. I found myself in a precarious position, trying to navigate these increasingly fraught discussions without letting my in-laws sense that they had cornered us. However, the situation escalated drastically. Just a week ago, Bobby and I had the most intense argument we've ever experienced. Though there was no physical aggression, his words were piercing. He declared that the $420,000 he planned to give to his parents wasn't just mine to decide on, suggesting he had the right to do as he pleased with it. He claimed he had been considerate by previously seeking my input, but no longer felt compelled to do so. The argument reached a peak when he actually went ahead and transferred the money to his parents without any further discussion with me. I only learned of this when my mother-in-law casually mentioned receiving the funds. I was livid, not just about the money, but the lack of respect for our mutual decision-making in our marriage. This secretive act on his part left me feeling deeply betrayed, igniting a fierce debate over our financial priorities and respect within our relationship. Bobby was fully aware that I was against his decision, yet he chose to proceed and donate the entire $420,000 he had saved over the years to his parents, not sparing a single dollar for us. When I confronted him, urging him to retrieve the funds, he dismissed me abruptly, insisting on managing his relationship with his parents his way. Despite my efforts to remind him that, as a couple, we should make such significant financial decisions together, he wouldn't listen. Our ongoing disagreements seemed to have exhausted him to the point where, amid a heated argument, he shockingly threatened me with divorce. He yelled, declaring that if I interfered with his decision to support his parents financially, he would end our marriage and leave me. This threat was utterly absurd to me. I had stood by him through every high and low, and now he was ready to abandon our marriage over prioritizing his parents' desires over our collective future. I questioned him. Did he not care about the plans we made together? About building a life, having children, and finding happiness as a unit. None of it seemed to matter to him anymore. His focus was solely on fulfilling his parents' wishes, while I felt neglected and sidelined. In a moment of anger, he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. It's been a week since that day, and he hasn't returned home. Despite my numerous texts, calls, and voicemails, he continues to ignore me or leave me hanging. The hurt runs deep because I never imagined something like this could drive Bobby away. I reached out to my in-laws only to discover that Bobby has been staying with them since he left. He hasn't come home once. I'm overwhelmed with stress and confusion about what the future holds, grappling with the fear of what seems like the potential end of our marriage over a disagreement that feels so trivial yet so profound. As the days turned into more than a week, with Bobby not returning home, I reached a pivotal decision point. Initially, I was hesitant, unsure whether severing ties was the right move. But the ongoing chaos and the blatant disregard shown by Bobby and his family solidified my resolve. If Bobby was threatening divorce, then perhaps that was the inevitable path we were headed toward. So I took proactive steps and contacted my lawyer the first chance I got that morning. My lawyer informed me of my options, not only regarding the divorce, but also about potential legal actions I could pursue given the circumstances. After our comprehensive discussion, another stark realization hit me. I no longer wanted to be tied down by the memories, encapsulated within the walls of the house my mother had left me. The house, once a symbol of maternal love, had become a constant reminder of the tumultuous times with my husband. Determined to move forward, I decided to sell the house. It was entirely in my name, a parting gift from my mother, which legally allowed me to sell it without Bobby's consent and use the funds as I saw fit. The sale turned out to be quite profitable and significantly eased the financial burden of the legal proceedings. The very next day, after finalizing the divorce papers, I had them sent to Bobby. I knew exactly when he received them because almost immediately after, my phone rang. It was Bobby, furious and incredulous. He ranted about how absurd I was being, claiming he was planning to file for divorce anyway. His shock escalated when he learned about the impending legal actions I had initiated. The call was heated, filled with accusations and disbelief, marking a clear turning point in what had become an irreparable rift. Bobby absolutely lost his temper during our phone call, and it reached a point where I just couldn't tolerate his anger any longer, so I hung up on him midway through. As the days led up to the court case, I was a bundle of nerves, filled with all sorts of apprehensions about the potential outcomes. Thoughts swirled in my head about what could go wrong. What if the court decided against me? What if I ended up losing the money I had made from selling the house? Despite these fears, I didn't let them overpower me. I dressed confidently, put on my best smile, and walked up to the courthouse, ready to face whatever came my way. It was the day of the final hearing for our divorce, and it turned out incredibly well. Not only was I able to retain all the proceeds from the sale of the house, but the court also ruled that Bobby had to pay me a significant sum in alimony as a legal obligation. This outcome was unexpected, especially getting more money from Bobby, but it felt justified considering the emotional and mental toll his actions had taken on me. Accepting this money felt like reclaiming my dignity. The disapproval and dismay on their faces as the verdict was read brought a certain sense of vindication to me. They had probably never anticipated that their actions would backfire so severely. They might have thought they could manipulate me without consequence, but instead, they ended up losing significantly themselves. Since then, life has been relatively calm. I did receive a harsh call from my mother-in-law criticizing my actions, accusing me of being selfish and incapable of caring for others, even going as far as to say I could never start my own family. Despite this, I've been able to move forward. I used the money from the house sale to secure a new apartment for myself, where I could finally save without the constant pressure and demands from others. However, a part of me wonders about the measures I took. Was taking him to court too extreme? I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, so please share your opinions in the comments below. It was a surprising turn of events, but one I felt was necessary under the circumstances. I was astounded by the diversity of viewpoints expressed in the comments area of my most recent piece. Allow me to present a brief overview of the comments made. By asking, what's the big deal about giving your parents $420,000 if you have $550,000? A few people were really supporting Bobby. On the other hand, many others strongly disagreed. They agreed with me, pointing out that we've been helping his parents out financially for years as we've worked to build our own savings and secure our future. There was evident disagreement in the comments section. Since the house was legally in my name, a sizable portion of the camp criticized my decision to sell it and pocket the proceeds, calling it disrespectful. About half of the comments, on the other hand, supported my decision, saying that, given the circumstances, it was the right one. So let's have a longer conversation about this. Please leave a remark below, and together we can explore this matter further.